Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, we talk about AMD's Catalyst Omega Driver releases, getting started with the Plex media server, mechanical key switch discussions, and of course, those last-minute holiday gift guide ideas. It's all coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 296, recorded on December 18th, 2014, gearing up with Christmas gift ideas.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most helpful, most exciting, most informative, and most perky news in computer hardware anywhere at any time ever. I'm Battery Norton. Ryan Shrout's probably horrified already, but has not signed off Skype yet. Yes.
My finger was pretty close. The benefit you get is you can be 3 hours additionally perky than I get to be on a normal week-to-week basis. So yeah.
How can you not be perky? Can we get a dog picture here? There was a dog birthday. This is not hardware news, but this is important. I want everyone to see this picture.
There were puppy birthday parties involved, yes. Actually, apparently that happened while I was at work, so I didn't even get to attend said birthday party. But with hats and with ice cream and things like that. So my dogs turned one. The dogs that are often mentioned on the show. Right. They are now a full year old. It has been quite a long time. Look at them. They're adorable.
Cute.
They'll be asleep when I get home, hopefully.
Or waiting for more ice cream.
That's
and staring at you.
Yeah.
Or waiting for you outside like a couple of angry debt collectors.
That would
Ryan, there's a couple of Labradors outside that are looking for some money.
I don't know them. Never heard of them.
Oh, my goodness. You do, however, as of, I don't know, the last 36 hours, have an intimate and nuanced relationship with the AMD Catalyst Omega Driver release, not pre-lease, it is a release. Stability, features, performance, which I said backwards. I'm assuming that they made equal weight to stability and performance, and you didn't put stability last because, it was trailing off at the end there.
Hey, how you read the titles is up to you. I just tend to have a less personal relationship with my drivers than you do, apparently. Purely platonic relationships with my graphics card drivers is what I prefer. It's what I prefer. It's not always how it happens. Accidents occur, whatever. So this was an interesting thing. This happened. We recorded last week's show a little bit early, so we kind of missed this on last week's news. But AMD released a new driver, which in and of itself wouldn't warrant being the top story that we discussed for the week. Except this time they gave it a fancy name. It was called AMD Catalyst Omega. And along with that name comes the idea from AMD that they were kind of tired of being poo-pooed upon for having subpar driver quality. That NVIDIA gets all of the attention for being, more stable drivers, more active driver releases, more new features, more performance updates. And AMD tends to still have the reputation of, their drivers are bad, so blah, 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 extend out from there.
Well, so for those of us not familiar with the Greek alphabet, omega is the last word in the Greek alphabet and is used as, in this case, obviously, that the ultimate, the most amazing, the final, the last word, the most awesomest possible driver. And I think
they went for all those subtitles.
I'm right alongside you. I will say, NVIDIA has had some advantages in usability for the drivers. The drivers were simpler. They were easier to, basically, for non-driver enthusiasts to navigate. I think NVIDIA did a better job of making all of the 32,000 options inside of a freaking modern GPU driver more accessible and easier to manipulate. Maybe just me, but I'm excited. Have they made it simpler to deal with the unbelievable array of options on a graphics driver?
Yeah, not really. The fundamental driver is identical, right? The menus are built the same. The interface is still the same. What they really what they wanted to do was, so what they kind of did was they had some neat new features they want to include in a driver. They kind of saved them up and put them into this. They claim that they did significantly more QA on this driver than they had done on their standard release cadence drivers, something along the lines of 441,000 automated test cases and 11,000 manual test cases, which they didn't go into a whole bunch of detail with, but I'm guessing, automateds are either benchmark results or stability tests or whatever. And the manual ones are people installing the driver on a system and then manually running games or looking for visual, differences or whatever it is. And they counted each and everything that they could. What's interesting is that they were pretty upfront about, this is kind of going to be their plan right now is for this to be kind of a once a year thing that they do, that they put this blanket massive driver release with significantly more testing capability or testing done on that driver than on any of their other drivers. And then throughout the rest of the year, they're not going to not release drivers for the rest of the year. But the rest of the year will be, smaller bug fixes or as new games are released, making sure the drivers are properly optimized for performance on those games as best as they can. But then come next December or November, you will likely see, a different Catalyst Omega release, or maybe they'll call it Catalyst Zeta. I don't know what they'll go. I don't know where they'll go from there, but something else will occur. Now, to be honest, 11 months is an awful long time for either GPU company to really stick to their guns in terms of a roadmap. This could absolutely and will likely change dramatically between now and next December. But it's still a good first step for AMD as a company to try to say, hey, look, we are taking this stuff seriously. We are paying attention to what our users are saying about some stability issues or features that are missing. Right? If you look at the features, they added a lot of them center around video. AMD Fluid Motion Video. They added like an upscaling capability for 1080p to 4K content. They added frame pacing performance improvements for APUs. And then maybe the most important thing for discrete users is they added virtual super resolution, which is basically identical to what NVIDIA did with Maxwell when they released Maxwell a few months ago with dynamic super resolution. AMD's version is a little bit more limited. The idea is that you render the game at a higher resolution and scale it down to your 1080p or whatever resolution screen, thus giving you a little bit better image quality if you happen to have a lot of GPU horsepower left over for some older games or less GPU intense games. There's a little bit more restricted in terms of certain graphics cards this only works on the 285, the 290, and the 290X right now. And oddly enough, the 285 supports 4K, but the 290 and 290X only go up to 3200 by 1800, and it's because of like filter bandwidth limitations on the GPUs. Whatever, it's complicated stuff. You can read the story if you want to see exactly why that pans out. And then they did some minor performance stuff. Honestly, the performance for discrete graphics users, the changes from 14.11 to Catalyst Omega, aka 14.12, are very minimal for 95% of gaming scenarios, but there are some there. And then bug fixes is kind of what they were talking about a lot as well. It's like, hey, we got a lot of feedback from our fans and forum members about, hey, Chrome crashes with the Radeon driver when you do this, or the driver installer has a problem if you have this configuration, or what's some of the other ones here? 144 hertz displays with Crossfire have intermittent crashing when launching a D3D app, right? And they say that they basically took the top 10 most requested bugs to be fixed and addressed every single one of those in part of this driver, program, I guess, if you will, right? Like their kind of idea behind all this. So, they as the title of the story is they address performance, they address features, they address stability. I think it will be, it will take several months to see how this all pans out, right? Because even if this driver were released with kind of like a flawless transition, everybody loved it, which wasn't the case necessarily. But even if that were the case, if in January or February or March they released another driver or two that kind of has new bugs or has different issues, and they say, well, don't worry about it, we're going to wait until the next Omega release in December, that's not really acceptable either still, right? Like a 1-year cadence is too long for some of that. So this is really a good first step for AMD, but it's really just that. It is a first step. And they need to make consecutive, well-planned out decisions to continue that progress forward, I think.
Right. It's interesting. Someone pointed out in the chat room, Kali says, for whatever the reason, I have the R7 261 gigabyte, and I got a full 50% frame per second improvement in Far Cry 4, my favorite game right now. So, your mileage may vary.
Some games will do that, but that kind of stuff happened when we went from 14.9 to 14.10 to 14.11. Didn't happen strictly because of this kind of Omega release, if you will. So, there's some of that there. Like if you look at NVIDIA's driver release schedule, they released a driver almost every week through the month of November. And it was because as a game was released, they had what they call a game ready driver. And it was, meant to improve performance in that particular instance. And that can be very, very beneficial to an end consumer, right? So as long as AMD continues that idea forward, I think they've taken a very, very good first step to improving their image. But as anybody who has ever had, or any company has ever had like an image problem in the public's eye, you don't fix it in one day. You don't fix it with one product or something like that. It takes iterations on that to kind of revalidate yourself to the public, even if this public is buying your product still. So,
good work, AMD. More,
Indeed.
faster.
Indeed.
I don't know what else to say. I'm just like, it's a step in the right direction. Building and configuring the ultimate Plex media server is a story up on PC Perk right now. Jim, is it Tanis?
Yes, correct.
Tanis. So if you're not familiar with Plex, Plex is essentially a customized version of XBMC. XBMC is the unbelievably super configurable, unspeakably powerful home media software, home theater media software. Plex built on the XBMC platform. Its mobile clients are closed. The Plex itself is open, and it is really, really gorgeous when you get it set up. For example, that is the lead. That is a picture of Plex in action on a home theater or an HD TV right now. How did did Jim? How geeky did Jim get in the process of this one? I have not had a chance.
Very much so. Very much so, actually. And to be honest with you, going into this story, I didn't know, and still don't know very much about Plex. Right, like his knowledge level is way beyond what I have, and Ken uses it here. Alan's considering moving over to it. As somebody who had very little experience with Plex or knowledge about Plex before, like the information in this story is really interesting, and it definitely made me want to build and set up a Plex configuration of our own. Right, like we're debating putting one here and keeping it in the office. We've got really fast internet, and then you can watch it at home or do whatever you want to do because you can share keys, and there's all kinds of interesting stuff that goes on with Plex, which is essentially it's a media server, but it's kind of a, I guess we would consider that, I would consider that an understatement for what kind of functionality it offers. In the grand scheme,
it's a floor topping. It's a dessert wax. Dessert topping. It's a floor wax. But it's kind of funny, right? So Plex, there's a ton of Plex clients: iOS, Android, Windows, Simple TV, Roku, the Samsung Smart Hub, LG Home Theaters, Chromecast, Xbox One, Xbox 360. And you start out with like Plex Home Theater, which is like the mothership. And then you can access that with all the mobile clients or different devices. Then there's a web client now, that's an HTML5 web client. And I've never played around so much with a Plex Pass, but it's like $5 a month or $40 a year that gives you additional features. And Jim notes a cloud-based automatic camera upload function for mobile devices, the ability to sync select media to cloud providers for faster remote streaming. So if you're like, oh, the new season of X is out, or I ripped this new Blu-ray onto my home theater, box, and I want to access it faster instead of having to serve it through your home, your cable modem or your DSL modem. You can actually upload it to some sort of cloud service and access it that way. But and then he builds a Plex media server, which is awesome because it's interesting to kind of look. You know, you can run Plex off of a NAS box as the first thing that he points out, and I love the fact that he has the picture of that the DS2413, which is like the mother of all Synology boxes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 drive NAS box. You know, and it points out the one flaw when you run something like Plex on a NAS box is NAS boxes, dedicated NAS boxes have low power, relatively simple processors, and that makes it really, really difficult for it to transcode if you have a particularly peculiar format that your the HDTV needs, your phone needs, or something like that. You know, quote, even in the context of an aforementioned NAS debate, you don't need much horsepower to transcode even high bitrate 1080p video. Some scenes will be harder to process. Another Jim notes, the opening bird scene from Planet Earth is a great example. They're looking for 2,000 pass mark scores over a 1080p stream. So, you know, Athlon X4740 should be good for 2 simultaneous 1080p streams. A good mid-range option, Jim says, the Intel Core i5-4440. And it'll handle 3 1080p streams without breaking a sweat. Quote, if you really want to go all out and stream to the entire neighborhood, you'll need a high-end option like an i7-4790 or an i7-5820K. You know, in short, Jim writes, next to the network connection that delivers your media, the CPU will be the most important component of your dedicated Plex media server if you plan to transcode. So basically, if you don't plan to transcode or you're only going to stream to one particular location in the house, you can spend no money on a processor and do really, really well. You know, it's kind of like a free NAS box. You want lots of RAM.
I find the whole idea of the Plex ecosystem really interesting. There's apps for the Xbox. We had it when we were testing out some stuff this week. We had Ken has his Plex media server at home. He had connected to it on his phone, and then he was using Google Chromecast to send it to a TV in the office. Yeah. Right. So like that kind of capability, which is obviously it's combining Chromecast as well as Plex, but like the app for it and all that stuff works really well. And it's just a really cool experience overall. The only thing I wish Plex had was some kind of like live TV tuner support DVR capability. Right now it is really just kind of your media files. However you acquire them will be available, you know, kind of through that stuff. So still very
here we go. Wait, hold on.
Okay.
Tableau plus Plex. So let's see. Tableau Plex channel, lovingly created by 2 awesome Tableau fans. So you might be able to do, this is using a separate over-the-air DVR. So the Tableau over-the-air DVR and then integrating that with Plex. But that is Tableau 200 DVR. Hold on. Wait for it. It's like $220 for a 2-channel over-the-air HDTV DVR, and then dumping that into the Plex ecosystem. Yeah. I don't know if they have one that'll do cable though. In any case, those are all over the air. So because you're looking for something that would like a cable card would go into,
like
right?
if TiVo had like the ability to dump all of your recordings into a Plex folder, and then Plex had the ability to stream that wherever you were at, and you could use it on your media server. Like that would be something that would be really cool to do, or if there's hacks around for that, would be neat as well. But there's still no perfect home theater PC solution, but this is definitely a fantastic part of it. And if you don't know, like literally, I'm not just saying this because it's on our site. If you don't know anything about Plex and you hear people talking about it all the time, which was definitely the case for me, this story that Jim wrote on the website at PC gives you a ton of detail on what it is and why you might like it. So
it's pretty cool. No, it's if you've never checked it out, it's worth investigating. Inateck FE2005 USB 3.0 UASP external 2.5-inch SATA enclosure review. I just bought a fresh SATA USB 3.0 adapter and a fresh USB 3.0 card just yesterday at the computer shop. at the computer. Well, we have Central Computer. It was in San Francisco. I was meeting somebody to hear a product briefing, and then I was like, I need USB cables and a USB 3.0 adapter, and this is actually a really nice adapter. It's funny like how many USB 3.0 enclosures there are right now.
There's
and
a
many
ton.
of them, you know, because it's funny, it doesn't take much. There's a little tiny bit of PCB that converts the SATA connection on the board to USB 3.0, and then they wrap it in a case. This one actually, I like the fact that you can just pop the case open and slide your SSD or your hard disk drive into it. I don't know if you could, if it's about 2 shots, there it is. That's cool. Having, you know, had to deal with getting the smallest screwdriver in the planet to undo 4 screws to open up the case, to do 4 more screws to release the hard drive. That seems really thoughtful to me. That's nice. And if you scroll a little bit more, you see the tiny little bit of PCB that has USB 3.0 on one side, you know, and SATA on the other. So it's pretty simple stuff. How was the performance of it?
It's pretty good. So what's interesting about this one is so USB 3.0 docks have been getting better progressively. This one is one of the new ones that offers UASP support, which is, I'm blanking on what it stands for, but it essentially allows you to add the SCSI. I think the last word is SCSI protocol. You're adding the capability for command queuing to USB 3. Normally when you do USB transfers, it's bot. It's just, you know, just individual sequential transfers. You're basically going at a queue depth of 1, and so it kind of limits your performance. If you're moving, even if you're moving one large file, it can limit performance. If you're moving lots of smaller files, which happens quite frequently, then that limits performance even more. So by adding UASP and then having a chipset and driver that supports it, which I think Intel's most recent USB 3.0 drivers definitely support UASP, you get improved performance. We're talking about 389 megs read speed, 341 megs write speed, and that is with, I think Alan tested that with a Samsung 840 EVO SSD as the kind of installer there, or the installed drive. And the best part is if you go actually to those ADO results just a little bit below that, where it looks at random access. So this would give you, like, in theory, how much better are your results when you're moving a bunch of small files. The top graph is showing you with like the basic queue depth of 2, and say you look at like the 8K files, which are at, or let's look at the 4K files, like 40 megabytes per second or so. And if you go down to the higher queue depth, those are going up to like 70 megabytes or so. So you're going, you know, you're getting a 80 to 90% performance increase going from 40 to 70 megabytes per second at those particular file sizes. Right now, you're, you know, at the super high file sizes where you're one giant 1 gigabyte file, that difference will be minimized for sure. My favorite part about this device, though, is it's like $19. Like you can pick them up for 15 to 20 bucks. And on our podcast last night, we were like, hey, even if you don't specifically have a reason to want this now, these are the types of devices that are super handy to have around when your mom or your friend comes over with a laptop that is dying and you need to get all the data off of a hard drive. And now you've already got that dock there for it, or you need to, you know, you're upgrading the SSD in your system or something like that. You just need someplace to dock it temporarily and still get significantly higher transfer rates. I mean, USB, if you hook that up to a USB 2.0 dock, you're talking about 25 megabytes per second or 30 megabytes per second. So an order of magnitude difference in performance if the storage can keep up with it. So it was a neat little device. Like you said, it was super easy to plug the hard drive or SSD in and take it out, and it, you know, easy.
I like
easy
simple.
is good. Yeah.
Yeah, simple is nice. Simple or not simple? Scott wrote up basically mechanical keyboard switches explained and compared. I don't know how to make that any simpler. Mechanical keyboards have been gaining in popularity. You know, basically Cherry, the MX line of switches. I'm gonna pull a quote from Scott here. Until recently, the Cherry MX line of switches were the basis of just about every major gaming mechanical keyboard. Although we will discuss recent competitors later on. So there is the IBM Model M keyboard, which I use, which is not actually a mechanical switch, technically. It's a buckling spring switch. I could get into that, but I would nerd out, and people would probably freak out. just because I can just nerd out on that all day long. But I happen to love, that's my personal favorite keyboard. The Cherry MX keyboards, you know, basically there's a chart here, and it's funny, like linear, tactile, clicky, and then looking at the, you know, SB is stronger springs for the space bars. The Click Gray is intended for space bars, and Cherry MX white, green, and blue keyboards. The MX Green is intended for space bars, and Cherry MX Blue. It's kind of funny to look at the, like, sort of the array of feels. And they started selling on Amazon recently these little, like a PCB with 4 switches on it, so you could feel the difference between a blue, a red, a green, or a brown, a blue. You know, they have sort of a mix. It was,
do you have one of those?
Michael Hand does, my partner in crime on Die Tryin'.
I think Cooler Master made those, didn't they?
Yeah, it sounds about right. And then I think somebody started bringing them over on Alibaba. But, you know, yeah. So the 4 main Cherry MX switches are blue, brown, black, and red. And then there's a bunch that you don't normally get into. Linear mechanical switches, the red and the black. Except, you know, one has more resistance than the others. Quote, the switch does not give you any feedback, i.e. it's not clicky that a press has occurred. Unless you actually physically bottom all the way out. People's, you know, these switches are supposedly better for gaming because there's nothing getting in the way of repeated presses on the same button. You know, and it's kind of funny, like the SteelSeries 7G, it's cool that he actually has examples of all the different keyboards using the different keys. Summary for Cherry MX Black, firm, smooth, and relatively quiet. Summary for Cherry MX Red, light, smooth, and loud if you tend to bottom out. Tactile mechanically switches, those are the brown switches. That basically you have to go buy a bump to get the switch to, well, switch the, considered a good compromise between gaming and typing. Corsair Vengeance K70, the Code 104. Then there's clicky mechanical switches, the Cherry MX Blue switches. So there's a slider in 2 pieces, quote, a plunger stem that is pressed by the user and a floating piece that touches the filament. You know, a bump and a click, basically for typing. Like, well, the reason people who type a lot love IBM Model M keyboards is because they make it super easy to type fast because there's so much tactile feedback on each key. I don't know, it's interesting. And then there are new ones coming out, which are is Razer's actually making these, or is Cherry making these for Razer?
So the patent on the switches is over. Now they can just they can just make their own. So this is not a partnership with Cherry. In fact, I think there's quite a bit of animosity about, you know, all these competitors coming out. And then Logitech has their own as well, which is kind of interesting. So I love these descriptions of these types of things and the little animations that Scott made to kind of give you an idea of why they feel differently is definitely helping me remember. Like if you know, if you ask me what's the difference between a Cherry MX Black and a Cherry MX Red, I don't have any idea. I don't know why you're asking me that question. But when you read about it and you see it in a table form and you see it in a graphic form, it definitely helps you out there. And then he lists some examples of what keyboards use those particular switches, so it can give you some idea of what they cost and all that stuff. So pretty neat stuff for sure. We go through a lot of keyboards here. We get a lot of keyboards in, and
just why you should be using an IBM Model M. Then you have one keyboard.
Well, we're not breaking them. We just need to like it's like, well, hey, somebody sent us this. Let's try it for a long time, right? And
see, once you found perfection. Once you found perfection, you need not.
Fair enough.
I kid. MSI GT72 2QE Dominator Pro Gaming Notebook Review. Quote, the baddest gets better. Steve Chardon wrote this up for PC Per. How heavy is this thing?
You know, it's not as bad as it looks, honestly. If you look at some of the pictures, like it is a very thick case. But it is made out of some fairly light plastic, and a lot of it is open air to like allow the air to move out of the heat sinks. It's not incredibly dense. When I picked it up, it was lighter than I expected it to be, I guess is what I'll say. I mean, I still wouldn't carry it around in a backpack during CES or anything like that. But
well, it's a lunch tray, right? It's a 17.3-inch TN-LED matte display, which I love the fact that it's matte and not shiny. Intel Core i7 4710 HQ quad core running at 2.5 gigahertz. NVIDIA GTX 980M with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 VRAM, 32 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte Hitachi drive. There's a lot of computer packed into that case.
32 gigs of RAM. 32
awesome.
gigs of RAM in a laptop.
All I'm thinking is, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of portable video editing. Screw gaming. I want to edit video on this thing on the road.
Yeah, it's actually, to be honest with you, we tried to ask MSI to let us keep it for that very reason. Like, hey, we're going to CES soon. We sure could use a video editing machine. They're like, yeah, we're actually going to use that in some of our demos, so we need that back. I'm like, damn it. Okay, fine.
It's how much is it?
So the model we tested was like $29.99. Right, so it's pretty high up there. It has a quad SSD configuration, a quad RAID 0 SSD configuration, which is really what jacks the price up significantly. For about $2,200, you can get the same hardware minus, it's only one SSD, 128 gig SSD instead of 4 of them, and 16 gigs of RAM instead of 32, I think. Right. But otherwise, you get the same processor, you get the same GPU, and I think maybe it's a 1 terabyte hard drive instead of a 2 terabyte hard drive. I think maybe is the difference there. But everything else is pretty much the same, and you're saving, you know, $700 to $800 off of the price for that. I mean, we've talked about the performance of the GTX 980M graphics, and it's really impressive in terms of what GPU horsepower you can get in a notebook like this.
Yeah.
The only thing I think, not the only thing, but I think the most important things worth pointing out here is that if you look at, say, I think the page 3, which is called Battery Life Part 1, he talks about battery boost, which is that idea of extending the amount of game time you have when you're gaming on a battery. Right. And most people have always assumed, oh, gaming on a battery is useless. It's kind of dumb. It's worthless. When we talked about the 980M before, we talked about what battery boost did, but we didn't actually have results for it. So if you scroll down like Portal 2 there, you're going from, if you don't have battery boost enabled, you're looking at gaming time of 57 minutes versus with battery boost on, a gaming time of 2 hours and 10 minutes. Scroll down just a little bit more, Burke, there. You'll see a bar graph that kind of labels everything out in a little bit easier. A little bit more. There you go. The one with the green stuff. There you go. So 57 minutes to 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's the biggest jump we saw. And the way to explain that is when battery boost is off, the GPU is running as fast as it can to render as many frames as possible as it can, which in Portal 2's case is like 150 frames per second or something like that, right? It's a lot of frames that it's rendering because it's not a very intense game. But when you turn on battery boost, it limits the frame rate to 30 FPS, right? It caps it at 30 frames per second. So it allows the GPU to render, it renders a frame and then it gets to wait for a little bit. And then it renders a frame and then it gets to wait for a little bit. And all that waiting is it's getting the power down each and every time. So the result is significantly less battery or power consumption and thus significantly longer battery life. And other games had big jumps too. You know, World of Tanks saw some pretty big increases. Diablo 3 did. But if you look at games, for example, like, let's see, where's one? Metro 2033. Didn't see very much increase at all. Because the game was already rendering close to 30 frames per second, right? It's a very intense game. So the GPU didn't have as much to save by going into battery boost mode. I think in that result, we went from 57 minutes to 64 minutes, right? So not really much to write about. It's something, but not a whole lot. So, you know, I came away pretty impressed with, hey, this actually works. There will be some people that will complain about, you know, gaming at 30 frames per second, and it will definitely feel different, and they're changing image quality settings. But if you're concerned about gaming on a battery, like if you're at grandma's house over Christmas or something like that, and you sneak upstairs and you want 2 hours of playing Call of Duty Ghosts or something like that, then you might be able to get away with that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. Like the idea that you can option it up with like 4 SSDs and you know, like a 4 drive RAID 0 array with SSDs. I don't know. The performance is fantastic. It's not a cheap machine, but the performance looks really good. How was the gaming? How did people feel about the gaming in the power saving mode at 30 frames per second? Did it impact gaming performance? Did people feel like it wasn't keeping up with the intensity of their play?
I mean, it depends on the game, right? Like Portal 2 is, especially going from like 100 and something frames per second to 30, you're going to notice that difference.
Right.
The question is do you value the extended playtime over the better game experience? Because you can turn battery boost off. If you just want to game at the 57 minutes at the full performance that you can get on a battery, then you're free to do that, right? But if you say, well, okay, I'm okay with 30 frames per second because it will be a consistent 30 frames per second, right? And it should be a smooth 30 frames per second. Then, I think the experience detriment is kind of minimized, really, in that regard. That's and when I tested it and played around with it when we had it here, I thought the same thing. So there will still be some people that won't like it. I know there will be people that hate anything under 60 frames per second. And for those people, you can adjust the battery boost up to 60 frames per second. It just means it will be less effective at extending your battery life while gaming. So, and if you are sternly believe you will never game while on a battery, then you don't have to really worry about it. So I guess. Or without a charger, I guess I should say. If you have never gamed without an AC adapter plugged in, but yeah,
which is, I don't know. Yeah, okay, portable for LAN parties, but probably still not something you're going to use to play Counter-Strike in the middle of a field. At least not for very long. Samsung's 32. Oops, sorry. Samsung's 32-layer VNAND dissected by Tech Insights, analyzed by 3D in Cities. These are really cool pictures. What is Alan talking about here? VNAND, I mean, obviously, but
I mean, that's pretty much what the story is look at these cool pictures that a website, Tech Insights, found. They didn't find them. They took these pictures, which is actually as impressive as the pictures themselves. So if you look at the first black and white picture, you're looking at a picture of the die, and those are all the contact pads on it for the BGA. The next shot is a picture of the die itself, right? The kind of pinkish looking thing you got there. And then you start getting into
the crazy pants stuff.
Yeah, the crazy stuff like that. The next one underneath that is a 350x zoom, looking at the edge of the die, like if you're looking across it, right? Like you kind of cut it in half and you look through it, right? And what's interesting is you see those lines going straight up and down. Those are the holes that are drilled, not really, but are created in order to have the vertical NAND capabilities, right? And then you scroll down a little bit more and you get to 1500x zoom on there, and you can see those things that look like nails. Those are the, you can see the 32 layers that it is creating with that. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, you're actually looking at it from the top. Those are the tops of those nails looking down into them, right? And it's super interesting stuff. Like that's, by the way, that's a 30,000x zoom on that device. Like those things that look like nails are actually crystal, that is a crystalline substance that has grown up through the hole that is created. It's not something that is inserted in there. I mean, if you have interest in kind of process technology and how all this stuff works, it's definitely worth looking at these photos and then going over to that Tech Insights story and kind of getting some more detail, maybe a little bit more detail than you can handle. It was for me, but I mean, it's so incredible to look at this picture, that last one that is, it shows you the scale there of, hey, this is 20 nanometers. Right. And so now you're seeing kind of how the size of this stuff is. It's like, I said this on the podcast last night when I talked to my dad about, I'm working on processors that are running a 22 nanometer technology. And he's like, it's totally incomprehensible to almost everybody out there until you kind of show them these pictures. You talk about how many human hair widths, this is, or how many times less, how many human hairs, I forget what I'm trying to say, but how many of these are equal the width of one human hair? Like how many thousands of them are there? And you start to give them real world examples of some of that stuff. But if you just want to see neat pictures, of what your 850 Pro or 850 Evo flash memory looks like. Somebody tore it all apart to see.
It's crazy. And they had to cut it to get that picture of the spikes, the 32 layers in there. They physically had to cut this apart. And which is crazy is because if I'm not mistaken, those physical spikes or those cells or in between those cells are actual layers of tungsten. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. Like the connectors in between those. I don't know. It's amazing to realize that what we're doing comes down to structures that cannot be seen. Dancing angels, pinhead, argue. It's just, yeah, it's crazy, dude. I'm with you. Intel shows pictures of the new Broadwell Nook. It's a Nook.
It is. It is. There's really not much to this other than Intel. They haven't announced that product. They just happened to like change the kind of imagery on their Nook landing page. Mm-hmm. And people went, hey, that doesn't look like anything that's actually been announced before. And then, of course, they don't say anything. And, you know, whatever. CES is right around the corner. This will be shown there. I'm quite sure of it. It makes sense. They're going to have Broadwell U, which will be, you know, the higher performance variant of what we talked about that is currently selling as the Core M processor to be a little bit higher wattage, a little bit higher performance. So, you know, what's interesting for me in that for the Nook is that they'll either be able to make them smaller and use less power and maybe even be completely passive with no fans, which I think would be awesome. Or you'll be able to get better performance out of it, depending on what the TDPs that Intel chooses to go with for this particular part. So I've always been a fan of the Nook. I've also always kind of thought it was overpriced for what it is. It's just a little bit too expensive for the bare bones setup that you have to get. But they realize they're selling against their Ultrabook brand with the Nook as well, because it's essentially identical hardware. But something to keep your eye out for in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, as well as how often and where those show up.
That'll be interesting. We can go on a Nook hunt. Going on a Nook. I'm sorry. I don't know. We've loved these since the first one. We love them now. The NCASE M1 crowd-funded mini ITX case is once again up for pre-order. So, which if you scroll down a little bit, you see this delightful, and it's cool, right? NCASE basically put a bunch of people together, came up with a case. And now they're looking to build another one. $185. No, that's the M1 ordering I'm looking at there. You know, it's a beautifully engineered case. It is freaking gorgeous. It is, you know, we love it. There's another chance to order it. If you want one, order. Oh, it is $185. Estimated shipping date, 2014-12-18. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
This is like another, you know, I think it's mostly the same, but it is a different, slightly different revision.
Okay.
But Sebastian actually reviewed the first one of these that was actually shipped. A consumer bought it, didn't fit the components that they wanted it to, so sent it to us to use for review. This is kind of the third revision of it. I still am infatuated with the idea of a crowd built case. You know,
I'm still infatuated with the drive
that hard
slot location.
Thread. Oh,
no,
yeah. At the top?
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if you go to the ordering page for it, I love that when you click on the optical drive slot, which sticks out vertically above the front panel. No, I'm with you. It's neat. You know, the crowdsourcing is such a bizarre concept. You know, Local Motors did it, you know, to a certain degree, but this was, I think, much more open or flat. I could be wrong about that.
I mean, it was just like, it was a thread on Hard OCP's forums. It was like, hey, what do you guys want to see in a mini ITX thing? And they had all these cool ideas. And somebody said, well, maybe I'll try to design one in SketchUp or AutoCAD or whatever. And then everybody was like, yeah, that looks awesome. Did some renderings. And they're like, okay, let me see if we can find somebody that actually make this. I forget which company they ended up going with. It was maybe Silverstone or something, Thermal Takes, one of those guys, to actually get it to manufacture. And then, you know, just made it and sell it. I mean, $185 for a case is pretty steep, but you got to keep in mind how this is a low run type item. You know, they're not making tens of thousands
it's a boutique.
of these.
I mean,
it's
literally like a boutique design, and it's funny, like you know, it's tiny. It is for somebody who is looking for the least amount of case, you know, for, you know, it's just so funny for a mini ITX board. I mean, it's super tiny. It's, you know, it's a little bit wider than a CD case. It's probably about 2 CD cases high. It's pretty. The aesthetics are really gorgeous. You're going to have to, assembling it is an exciting process.
Yep.
But I don't know. It's cool. I like it. I like the fact that they're still doing this. And, you know, I want one, but at the moment I have 3 cases in my garage. And the children want Christmas toys. So I'm going to hold off on this one for now. You know, it's children. Have some cold children. That'll make me really popular. Twitch at twitch.tv is the email address here. We got a tweet from @Cruel who says, @Ryan Shrout, @Patrick Norton, Christmas stocking stuffer time, best gaming keyboard, mouse, monitor, etc. and must-have games. Far Cry 4, I think, is what everybody I know is obsessed with right now. If people love Far Cry 4. You know, if you want to give somebody sort of a flexible gift, you know, giving them a little Steam action would be nice.
Ooh,
I swear by IBM Model M keyboards for gaming and for typing. You know, a lot of people like the DAS keyboard. What's your favorite gaming keyboard right now?
If I had the keyboard I am using right now is that Topre Type Heaven. I don't know if I'd consider it it's what I'm using right now. I'm very non-committal when it comes to keyboards because I spend a lot of time at 3 different stations in the office. Right. They all 3 have different keyboards. I like typing on the Topre the best of them so far, but I'm one of the people that in a gaming purpose, I like it to be a little bit more quiet because if you're gaming on a headset or something like that, I always get annoyed when somebody on the other end of a conversation has one of those keyboards and I hear every time they strafe a little bit, it tick, 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 tick. So I'm going to go with some of the more silent options in that regard. Well, there's a lot of neat tech things. We actually, totally unrelated to this question. If you go to PCPro.com, we had a, we're doing like 10 days of Christmas type thing, which is really just like, hey, if you ran out of ideas for people, here's a tech item that might work. You know, and like we graphics cards, but then also like, hey, a Dremel. Like a Dremel is a really cool tool for somebody who, you know, maybe you're into computers, into case modding, or it's useful for tons of other stuff throughout your house as well. And then like Google Chromecast, there's one for like $30. It's super neat.
I'm going to give out a shout to the iFixit Pro Tech Toolkit. Now they've been a sponsor, but I literally have used it in the last 10 days for everything from a toilet seat to a child's toy repair to opening up a drive enclosure so I could put a new SSD inside of it. You know, I'm still a huge fan. Dell's ultra sharp monitors. I got to look at a couple of them recently. They have some gorgeous monitors from 4K down to 1080p. The Dell Outlet's a great place to get a deal on a Dell monitor. Not a sponsored statement, but the Dell Ultra Sharps are what I've been using professionally for a long time. The Roku 3 is a fantastic set-top box, not just because it's got a great interface, which it's kind of funny. I was really hoping that we were going to see a new Apple TV because I wanted to see some more applications and some updates to them. This, of course, did not happen because I know Apple wants to personally make my life more difficult. I'm being silly. But they don't really care whether I live or die. But the Roku 3, it's funny because, you know, if you've been using an Apple TV, spend $100 on a Roku 3. You won't have access to any of your iTunes content, but you will see how much better. You will see how much better the Netflix interface can be, or just simply by the fact that you have thousands of channels. Now, I admit, literally, if there's 3,500 channels on Roku, 1,000 of them are mega churches. You know,
that's true.
That you may or may not be interested in. You know, another 1,000 of them probably have 3 episodes of something. That last 1,000, though, there's a bunch of really, really good stuff in there.
I think there's a Plex app for Roku too. Is that right? I think there is.
Yes, there is. There's a Plex app for Roku. There are, you know, what they call like secret Roku channels or private Roku channels, which are everything from, you know, naughty channels to personal channels. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. And on top of it, if you ever like to listen to, if you want to watch, say, you know, your favorite, you know, something from, you know, the Amazon Instant Video, and you want to do it at 2 in the morning without waking up your children, the Roku 3 remote control, which is RF, has a headphone jack built into it, so you can plug headphones into the remote and listen to your stuff. It's an extremely well thought out player. It's really, really cool. I like it a lot. You know, Amazon, Netflix, PBS, HBO Go, Hulu Plus, Crackle, Vudu, Pandora. Oh, excuse me, 1,800 channels in the U.S. So there's just not 3,000, as I said earlier. I apologize. There's you know, it's close. It is really, really close. It's a nice piece of hardware. Headphones are always a nice option. Sony MDR V7506s cost about $100. You know, gift certificates for Amazon, everybody likes, but I don't have a favorite mouse. Oh, and Burke, by the way, would like me to point out that TWiCH has a Roku channel that everyone who owns a Roku should be using.
Correct.
If you watch the TWiCH programming.
If I had to pick, again, like after cleaning out my office at my house, I found a Logitech G5, like one of those old classic Logitech G5s. It's like, wow, this is a really great mouse. I do like the mouse I'm using now is the Logitech Hyperion Fury. I forget what the model number is, G402 or something like that. It's a fairly lightweight mouse that is its tag feature, its key feature is the fact that it has the accelerometer in it and can track super high motion speed. I'm not doing anything like that with it necessarily, but it is just overall, in my opinion, a very good mouse. And it's let's see, on Amazon you can pick that mouse up for $49. So in terms of mice, fairly inexpensive as well. Lots of super high DPI options, 8 programmable buttons depending on what you want to do with them. But it's not as flashy as, say, some of the other mice that have like 16 buttons on the thumb for your MMORPG RTS games or whatever. So there's tons of options for that, but I tend to go the more classic routes, if you will.
I still have a Microsoft mouse for most of my life. I've just discovered from Darren, I'm actually recording in the Hack House right now, that the Richmond refinery is on fire, which is a large chunk of the city of Richmond, which we are, and across the, well, actually, we are on the side of 580 that has the Richmond refinery on it. So I'm
probably leave.
It's very exciting. So I'm actually going to have to end this episode of TWiCH a little bit earlier than I had planned on. Do me a favor, if you're out there, keep an eye on techthing.com. Channel goes live, and our first episode will go up in the next couple of days. It's a new podcast with myself and Shannon, aka Snubs. PCPro.com. The 10 days of Christmas is pretty awesome if you're looking for last-minute holiday shopping ideas. And I would like to apologize for not getting a little farther into the questions today, but like I said, there's an oil refinery that's burning about a quarter mile from where I'm sitting right now. So I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll hopefully see you next week on TWiCH. Night, everybody.